R&B singer Cassie is back on the witness stand in her ex-boyfriend Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial. Before we tell you more, caution, the details and images at the center of this trial can be triggering for some viewers. Today, she testified that Combs kept her in a cycle of abuse and exploitation by threatening to release recordings of her with male sex workers in encounters Combs orchestrated and called freak-offs. Cassie Ventura continued her testimony after a day spent recounting humiliating details with her ex-boyfriend Sean Diddy Combs. Ventura testified that throughout their relationship, Combs forced her to participate in the freak-offs frequently and used the recordings as blackmail. "I feared for my career. I feared for my family. It's horrible. It's disgusting. No one should do that to anyone," she said. The jury was shown sexually explicit images taken from some of the freak-off videos. One juror's eyes widened as the first image of Cassie and a male sex worker appeared on screen in front of him. Another juror shook his head from side to side as the image was shown. They also saw photos showing a large dark bruise on Cassie's lower back and other bruises on her shoulder and thigh that she said she sustained in an altercation. Cassie also recounted more violent incidents, testifying that Combs had lunged at her with a corkscrew and kicked her in the back when he learned that she had started dating rapper Kid Cudi during a low point in her relationship with Combs. Combs is accused of exploiting his status as a powerful music executive to coerce women, including Cassie, into drugged-up sex parties. He has pleaded not guilty, and his lawyers say all sexual acts were consensual. Joining us now to talk more about this is former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani. Neama, Cassie continued her testimony for a second day now as prosecutor's third witness. The defense has already pointed out that this case is not about domestic violence. How will her testimony support the racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking charges?
What separates sex trafficking from consensual sex is force, fraud, or coercion. Adults can consent to freaky sex, no matter how strange it may be. But if it's forced or coerced, that's unlawful. So let's talk about the elements of coercion that the government has proven so far. First, Cassie testified that she was given a lot of drugs, so much so that she would vomit, and that these freak-offs would last days, up to 4 days. That's not something people would typically consent to. With respect to the force, Cassie testified that she was beaten. She had suffered a gash on her eye that required stitches with a plastic surgeon. She received a black eye during the 2016 hotel incident where she was trying to flee a freak-off. She was controlled by Combs. He would track her. He would have security find her. I mean, those are all elements of force. You add the guns and everything he did to really control every aspect of her life, her appearance, her outfit, her breast implants, her piercings. The government is trying to paint a picture of control, force, coercion that really has nothing to do with consent.
Can we talk a bit about the defense's approach?
The defense is going to be based entirely on cross-examination, and we know what their argument is going to be. They're going to admit the physical violence. They're going to argue that Cassie was also violent, and she admitted to being insanely jealous. So I expect us to hear some of that testimony during cross-examination. They're also going to argue what they did in their opening statement, that Cassie voluntarily stayed in this relationship for more than a decade. She could have left. She chose not to. And that's something that happens in a lot of abuse cases. Could be physical abuse, domestic violence, could be sexual abuse or sexual assault. So the government is going to have to be able to rebut that. They're going to bring on an expert later that's going to testify about the psychology of an abuse victim and why they don't leave. But the government did preview some of this, and Cassie did testify that she loved Combs and she did this to please him. So what's the line between doing something voluntarily for your partner that you may later regret or being coerced to do something? That's what a jury is going to have to decide.
Does anything stand out to you in the trial so far?
What stands out to me is the graphic and explicit evidence that's come in. Shock and awe. I'm talking about Cassie vomiting because she did too many drugs. her being urinated on and in her mouth by sex workers, her being forced to have sex while she was on her period, so there's blood all over the sheets, her having to have sex while she had UTIs, so many UTIs that normal antibiotics wouldn't work on her, baby oil all over the doors and walls, and a pool of baby oil and Astroglide.
It looks like the defense may call Cassie Ventura's husband to testify about allegations that Combs raped Cassie in 2018. How will this work?
There are some protections that may prevent Cassie's husband from testifying. There is a marital privilege. So anything that Cassie told him in confidence while they were married may not come in. Now, anything that was told before they were married may come in. So if she told him something inconsistent, if she didn't tell him that Combs raped her, for instance, that would be something that could be potentially helpful for the defense, because we know that Agnifilo, Garagos, and the entire defense team, they're arguing that this was fabricated many years after the fact for money, for revenge, or for fame, because Cassie never reported this to the police or medical personnel when it was happening.
As many follow this trial, a big question is, could Diddy walk out of this?
You never know what 12 strangers who can't get out of jury duty will do. So it's impossible to predict a jury verdict. Celebrities tend to do well at trials in this country, both civil and criminal. That being said, there is a lot of evidence in the case, and I think the video evidence and the other independent evidence corroborating what Cassie and the other victims are saying will result in a conviction. I'm talking about text messages. I'm talking about the testimony from the escorts and sex workers, members of Diddy's entourage and inner circle. I think they will all support the government's theory of the case that this was not consensual. And when you have other victims, like victims 2 and 3, taking the stand in the coming days and weeks, I can't predict that Diddy will be convicted.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us, Neama.
Thanks for having me, as always.